Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you all so much for being here. Are you enjoying the first ever Eugene VeganFest? Yay! My name is Hope Bohannick. I'm the organizer of the event, and I'm going to be introducing our next speaker. And I just wanted to mention a couple things. Please enjoy the day. I want to thank Sundance Natural Foods for being an amazing sponsor. They're our advocate sponsor, and they've been very, very helpful. They even let us hang a banner out, I don't know if you saw it, under their Sundance sign. So they have been very awesome. So thank you, Sundance. Thank them for being a sponsor, and support them and all their like 99% vegan store. I am just going to jump into introducing our next speaker. It is Lauren Ornelas, and Lauren and I go way back. We have been doing work together down in California since like the 90s. We can go all the way back to the 90s. And we were arrested together back in the 90s in our radical youth. Thank you. Oh, okay. So she's more badass than me. I don't know that I would. But that's Lauren, and that's something that I've admired about her for years. She's amazing. So grateful that she came all the way up here just for our event. Lauren has been deeply involved in animal rights activism since 1987 and is the founder and senior programs director for Food Empowerment Project. Food Empowerment Project is a vegan food justice nonprofit that promotes veganism, champions rights for farm workers, highlights the lack of access for healthy foods in Black and Brown communities, and raises awareness about the worst forms of slavery, including child labor in the chocolate industry. And I'll just add here that we were very careful to make sure that all of our vendors that are offering chocolate were on Food Empowerment Project's recommended list for non-slave labor and child-free chocolate. So yes, thank you. And you're going to hear more about that issue coming right up. So Lauren has a TEDx talk called The Power of Our Food Choices. She has also been on my Hope for the Animals podcast, so you can check her out there. Please welcome Lauren Ornelas.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. I want to first acknowledge that we are on Indigenous lands. It is the Indigenous lands of the, I learned how to say this hopefully correctly, Kalapuya Ilahi land, and just want to honor whose ancestral land we are on that is not our land. And also a labor acknowledgement about all the food that you're eating today probably comes at the hands of farm workers. So as Hope said, I've been involved in the animal rights movement since 1987. I've done investigations of factory farms and slaughterhouses, and as Hope mentioned, I've been arrested quite a number of times. But I started Food Empowerment Project. Actually, our 18th year was on May Day, May 1st. I just realized I don't have a little clicker. Oh, you do it. I do have a clicker. Human labor. All right, I got to make sure you're treated properly. I'm glad you're seated. Food Empowerment Project last year became a collective. I've always had issues with hierarchy and the idea that someone can be in charge and everybody else is supposed to be what they say, because I feel like that stifles creativity, it stifles growth of the organization, and more importantly, people who work for that organization do not feel that they have a voice because they have to worry about who is signing their paycheck. So we became a collective a year ago. And we're very excited at this model and hope that other organizations will follow suit. I think now today more than ever, we need to make sure that all workers have a voice and that are equal in what any organization, or I will say business as well, and how they conduct themselves. Go ahead and go to the next one. So Food Empowerment Project, what we're trying to do is we're trying to draw attention to healthy food systems and rotten food systems and show how a lot of the issues are very much connected. So a healthy food system will involve justice, compassion, dignity, equity, liberation, integrity, and appreciation and respect. However, a rotten food system will have ableism, sexism, discrimination, exploitation, capitalism, classism, racism, and colonization. Now, there's probably far more on both sides that can be had, but these are some of the main issues that we're going to be talking about. So I always like to start with my baby bunny. His name is Benito. He's named after the first indigenous president of Mexico, Benito Juarez. And my husband, who's taking a picture of me right now, and I found him on the streets in downtown San Jose, where he was probably dumped as an Easter gift. So a lot of bunny groups are out there talking about this, and it is a problem that people adopt them and then they dump them later. But I start with Benito because I feel like he exemplifies why we are a vegan organization. And that's because Benito has a right to his fur without having to worry about anybody wanting to wear it. He has a right to his flesh without having to worry about anybody wanting to eat him. And he has a right to his eyes and his skin without having to worry about anybody testing any products in him. Benito, like all animals, have fears. They have things that they like. They deserve respect. They deserve autonomy, except when I want to pick him up and kiss him, but I'm not supposed to pick him up. I'm only saying this because Mark's here. I would have just acted like I pick him up and kiss him all the time. But these animals, you know, no matter it is once we get to know them better, we realize their personalities. And they have a right to their being without anybody else, any humans interfering with that. You go to the next one. And since I know you're going to be hearing a lot, and you have heard a lot about veganism, I'm going to just briefly talk about this because that's what this whole event is about. But basically that it doesn't matter how small or how large these farms are, animals are treated in the same way. So you hear a lot about CAFOs, industrialized animal farms. It doesn't matter. I've investigated farms, very small farms in Georgia, where you had maybe 10 cows, but I still saw a baby calf in a crate so small that she couldn't turn around. You know, I had her bellowing back and forth to her mom. No matter what, with a small dairy farm or a large one, at the end of the day, they're separating the moms and the babies. Because why? Because they want to sell the milk to people to consume that milk. So our whole point here is just that small or large farms, it really doesn't matter. The same cruel ways in which animals are treated, having parts of their body cut off, their tips, their beaks, their tails, the teeth, the toes, like a turkey that I rescued from a slaughterhouse, it doesn't matter if they're small or large farms. They're still treated the same. So I don't know, hopefully many of you have heard about environmental racism, but environmental racism is when one portion of the population is more exposed to actually pollutants than anybody else. So it's primarily in Black and brown and indigenous communities where you have chemical plants, you have bus depots and things like that. You also have a lot of farms in these areas. So a lot of times you'll hear, oh, that is very hard to see, that is good to know. That doesn't matter how small the farm is. For a dairy farm, one cow produces 120 pounds of wet manure a day. So even a farm that just has 30 cows on it is producing 6,000 pounds of manure a day. In California, which is the #1 dairy producing state, these farms are located in the Central Valley, which is predominantly Latinx communities, and we face some of the highest rates of asthma in the country. And you can go to the next one. Oops, I guess go back one. I don't know what's happening. It's all right. That one. So pig farms are the same way in North Carolina and other places. Here you have Black and indigenous communities being some of the most impacted. And here you have community members who cannot open their windows in the summer times. They get headaches, they have respiratory problems, and their property values are worthless because nobody wants to live near a facility like this. And I've investigated farms, pig farms in North Carolina, and the colors that come out of there are not of nature. And the smell is just unbelievably bad. So as an organization that talks about impacts on Black and brown communities and indigenous communities when it comes to animal agriculture, we also think it's equally important to talk about where our food comes from. So for those of us who are vegan and went vegan for the animals, we did so because we didn't want to cause harm to another being. And the same situation goes for farm workers and how farm workers are treated. Currently, you know, farm workers have always been threatened with deportation and things such as that. But as you can imagine right now, in the current political climate, it's even worse. In fact, this morning, I'm on a list to be notified in case we need to help out about ICE in the community. Hopefully everybody knows who ICE is. I just got another one today about another farm worker community that's being raided by ICE. And these are people who are working and picking our food, and yet how they're treated in this country as if they're criminals. And I do not believe in these borders that has been created. And I do not believe that anybody is a criminal. They are just undocumented. So it's more severe right now. And that's why it's really incumbent upon all of us to make sure we advocate for farm workers. Lelo is a farm worker from Washington who's been detained. He is he's outspoken. He's an amazing activist who's been working for a long time for farm worker rights and with the farm worker union. A petition on our link tree means if you go to our Instagram, there's a petition you can sign in defense of Lelo. Here in Washington State, if you go to the next, I'm sorry, here in Oregon, if you go to the next one. Here in Oregon, farm workers are asking to be at the seat of the table when these issues are being discussed, and they're actually asking for more money as well. So if you go to the next slide. There's a bill right now in Oregon. If you want to defend and stand up for farm workers who are picking your food, if you're vegan or not, unless you're only eating what you grow, you have a farm worker to thank for everything you eat. So there's currently a bill right now that we're hoping that you all will support in defense of farm workers in the state of Oregon. There's an organization called PCUN, which is founded by farm workers that is based here in Oregon. That's a really wonderful organization that I had the privilege of meeting and touring with a couple years ago. So if anybody here is interested in getting more involved in farm worker justice locally, they're a fantastic organization. So if you want to go to the next one. But I'm going to talk specifically about farm workers in general, and as most produce comes from California, I'll talk specifically about my experiences in working with farm workers, and that's that the majority of farm workers are unhoused. They live in substandard housing. They live in their trucks. They live in cardboard boxes. These are people who are working day in and day out to put food on our tables. Their working conditions involve rapid sexual harassment taking place. They are working in extreme temperatures, whether it be raining and flooding or the heat that takes place. They suffer from wage theft, and if they try to speak out many times, they are threatened with deportation. One of the organizations we strongly support is the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. And what they've been doing is asking corporations to do some small things, which include paying for 1 penny more per pound for the tomatoes that they pick. And although they may not seem like a lot of money, 1 penny more per pound for the tomatoes has proven to be so effective in changing the lives of farm workers, they continue to push for it. They currently have a boycott of Wendy's, and they have a boycott of a grocery store chain in the Southeast called Publix. But they are an incredible organization and making incredible strides for farm workers. Go to the next one. So for our organization, one of the things we do every year is we do a school supply drive for the children of farm workers. The majority of the farm workers that we support are from Oaxaca in Mexico. They don't speak English or Spanish. They speak indigenous languages to that area. And one of the things that happened during the lockdown and COVID, as well as some of the fires that were taking place, is these are the communities who were most left out by any types of resources because of the language barrier. So we very much believe in language justice issues that respect indigenous languages as well as all the other languages that exist. But if anybody's interested in supporting, we just ask for donations, and we go out and we buy the backpacks, and it is one of the most beautiful things that we do every year, that these kids are just so hungry to do well in their education that they're so excited to get the school supplies. So we talk about workers locally. We also want to make sure to talk about workers abroad. And here's when we talk about chocolate and slavery in the industry. And this is one of the things why Food Empowerment Project says just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's cruelty-free. And so children get in these areas in a variety of ways. In Western Africa, children come from very poor countries nearby. They can be sold into it by a family member. They are also children who think they're going to be able to go get a job and be able to send money back to their families, and they're never seen again. There's also children who are actually stolen from marketplaces and trafficked hundreds of miles away to areas where their local dialects are not even spoken. They work in horrific conditions. Some children as young as 6 years old are forced to carry heavy bags such as this that can weigh about 100 pounds. They are using, you can go to the next one too, machetes. Thank you. Hopefully they have scars on their arms and legs. These are some very young girls working in these fields. And, you know, not only are they not paid, but they're also locked in many times overnight. And if they try to escape, they're beaten. In fact, some formerly enslaved people had a lawsuit against Hershey's, and one of the things they talked about was how they actually cut the bottoms of their feet to prevent them from running away. And we're not talking about something that happened long ago. We're talking about this stuff is happening currently, and it's just getting worse now because of the climate crisis and everything that's taking place. It's getting worse for these children and other enslaved people for chocolate. One of the things that a lot of people talk about is, oh, they're working with their families. And that's not always the case, as I mentioned. But even those who are, this is from Brazil, which is interesting because for as long as we've been doing this work, most of the slavery and child labor was taking place in Western Africa. But over the past several years, Brazil also now enters that area. And so even if they're working for their families, it doesn't mean that that's the type of life that the parents want their child to live in. So this is from a report where the cacao farmer says, if I didn't have this rope around my neck, my 12-year-old son who works in the harvest would be studying. They want their children to go to school. But why is this happening? Why is this taking place? And simply, it's greed. What needs to happen is that these farmers need to be making a living income so they don't need to rely on children and they don't need to rely on enslaving people. They need to, these corporations, these billion-dollar corporations, need to put money into the people who are making them rich. So for our organization, we've created a list of chocolates we do and do not recommend based on where they're sourcing their cacao. All the certifications have been found to be problematic. We do not trust any of them. Just like we don't trust free range and things like that, none of the certifications work. So our chocolate list is in Spanish, Portuguese, German, maybe another language that I can't remember, and obviously in English. And we update our chocolate list once a month. So if there's a chocolate that you like that you don't see on our list, you can reach out to us and we'll contact the company. We have the free app you can download. If you can't do it from there, we do have it at our table. You can just directly download it from there. And again, we update this list once a month. The final part of the work that we talk about when talking about food justice issues is food apartheid. And many people are familiar with this, learning about it, called food deserts. But we strongly believe in calling it what it is, which is a form of apartheid, which is built on racism and discrimination. The vast majority of people impacted by this are Black, Brown, Indigenous people, and I would also add immigrant populations as well, where we have some of the highest rates of dietary diseases because of what is in our communities. And that tends to be an overabundance of fast food, liquor stores, and convenience stores, and that's where we end up getting a majority of our foods. So I did a little research on Portland, and even though Portland, as progressive as it may seem, has this issue, it has this problem, just like almost every other country, not only city, and not only in the United States, but abroad. And it's the same people who are always impacted. So even progressive Portland has a big problem with the ability for people to access healthy foods. I also starting to address more a lot of college students as well who are facing not only food, but access to healthy food as well. And we feel like it's an issue that's not really talked about a lot that needs to be. I know that, I went vegan in 1988, and I was in high school, and, it was very hard when I was in college I grew up in Texas, so it was even more hard. But it was really hard, and there's just not a lot about that that needs to be said. Food Empowerment Project, actually, we created a Eating Vegan in College guide that's available on our website and hopefully printed soon. But we did create something like that. But again, it's an ongoing problem that many people are facing. So when we work on this issue, so one of the reasons why we work on this issue is because we've heard a lot, it's easy to be vegan. And I feel like that's a really problematic thing to be saying because it's simply not true. It may be easy for those who have privilege to be vegan, but it's not easy for everybody to be vegan. And if you're talking about an issue that you have a diverse audience listening to you, they're going to know it's not true. They're going to know that maybe their aunt lives in an area where they don't have access to fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. So we need to be very careful when we say things like that about veganism. I started doing this work because I lived and worked in downtown San Jose, and I had 2 liquor stores across the street from each other, and I had to drive to another town in order to get organic produce. And so what we did is we've done this in a couple of different ways. Santa Clara County is known as the Silicon Valley. It is where Adobe, Netflix, Apple, all these very big tech companies are based. And I wanted to see if we had a problem with lack of access to healthy foods. And so we went out and we physically surveyed and we compared Palo Alto, if you've ever heard of Palo Alto, a very high-end area, to the lower-end income area of East San Jose. And we did a comparison between the high-income areas and low-income areas. And, of course, we knew what we'd find. Way more access to healthy foods in the higher income areas than in the lower income areas. We also found that frozen vegetables were 13 times more available in the higher income areas, and we found that organic was pretty much non-accessible. We also did this work in Vallejo, California, which is near Oakland, Berkeley area on the way to Sacramento. And here we just did the city because one of the founding members of the Black Panther Party asked me to take a look at their access areas, the access to healthy foods in the community. And here we simply just did that one city, which tends to be more urban than the rest of the county. And one of the consistent things we found in doing this work was one of the biggest barriers that people had accessing healthy foods wasn't necessarily what the USDA talks about, which is proximity, which is about, a food desert is based on your proximity to healthy foods. What we found was the biggest barrier was that people aren't making, that people weren't making enough money, that the food was too expensive. And so when you have food that's too expensive, and as an organization that does farm worker justice, we certainly don't want prices of food. Okay, I'm saying this in recognition of the times that we're in, but for the most part, we don't want prices of food to go down, such as fruits and vegetables. And so what we need more is wages to go up. We need equity in how people are paid. And so one of the things that we start fighting for now is living wages. And I call on any vegan who wants more people to go vegan, you need to join the call for living wages. Not only is it what's right and what's just, it's also a matter of people can't afford this food. And so we need to push for living wages. That would be McDonald's workers, Walmart workers, city, state, federal workers. We need living wages for everybody. We need more equity in the system because we're not going to survive without it. One of the other things we realize is that a lot of people who are immigrants ate healthier in the communities that they lived in before they came to the United States. And if you've heard that before, I had heard it before, but it literally came out in every focus group we did. Because these people were able to grow their own food. They were able to grow their own food where they lived, and they didn't want to all of a sudden have fresh tomatoes that they cooked with, and now they had to cook with tomato sauce that they got at the convenience store. One of the other things is we found that there were not a lot of meat and dairy alternatives as well, and we find this to be, obviously as a vegan organization, we want people to go vegan for the animals, right? We want people to not consume dairy for the cows, but we also have to recognize the impact that not having plant-based milks has on communities. I'm Mexican, so I will say my indigenous ancestors did not consume dairy because that is something that Columbus brought over. He's the one who brought the cows over. So it's, the term, go ahead. A lot of times you'll hear the term lactose intolerant. You can some things. We use the word lactose normal because one, at the end of the day, there's nothing natural about consuming the milk of another species, and two, it kind of implies that those of us who were impacted by colonization, that there's something wrong with us. And there's nothing wrong with us and our indigeneity or people who, like the people who have it through imperialism, people who were enslaved and brought to the Americas. There's all these different ways, and instead the white norm is what seems to be placed, that we're intolerant. Well, we're just fine, you know? But that's the problem with without having plant-based milks in these communities, is that children go to school, they get stomach aches because they're forced to drink cow milk. And it also impacts their ability to learn, you know? So this is one of the things we've been doing is go ahead to the next one, is we've been putting up billboards that say Got Colonization. And that directs people to our website, gotcolonization.com. That talks about colonization and the impacts of colonization. It also talks about environmental racism, cows and goats and how they're impacted, and also worker impacts. We've been putting these up. We have the brochures on our table if you're interested. Our materials, it's available in English and in Spanish. You can go to the next one. The other thing we noticed in Vallejo was that the higher income areas had more grocery stores than the low income areas, that way more people in the higher income areas, they had fewer liquor stores and liquor stores. And the reason why is because many people in these communities rely on convenience stores and liquor stores to get their food. This is an ongoing problem in every community that we've worked in, that when you go to these places, I don't know if you've ever gone into like a liquor store or even a small convenience store, and they may have like a little basket and has like a couple bananas or a couple apples. That's what these people are relying on to get their food. That is what they're relying on. And many times, these don't even have prices on them. So people who don't speak English are an automatic disadvantaged from being able to find out how much the prices of the food are. And the person behind the counter could change how much it costs depending on what they think of the person. So this is an ongoing problem that we've been trying to work on. Unfortunately, a lot of this are federal issues, and we do not have that type of reach. We're a small organization. But this is why we find it so important when you hear about people talking about diabetes or anything like that, or heart disease, and they talk about Black, brown, and Indigenous people and our health. It's so important to acknowledge, like, why? It's a symptom of racism and discrimination that our communities don't have the same access to healthy foods as other whiter, more affluent communities do. And making it be about us is wrong. And we need everybody to speak out about this. One of the other things that we found was that Safeway grocery store, which also goes under these banner names, was placing restrictive deeds on their former properties, preventing new grocery stores from moving in. So what that means, in the community in Vallejo that we were working in, there was a Safeway downtown in a Black-brown community, also where a senior living facility was. And they moved from that location, and when they moved, they put a restrictive deed preventing any grocery store from moving in for 15 years. They were doing this in Washington State as well. They did this in Washington, D.C. They did this in Colorado. Some of these restrictive deeds go on for 30-plus years. And so we've had a long-time campaign trying to get Safeway to stop this way of doing things. Now, they're not the only ones, but this is who we're targeting. So to try to start out with them, because basically they're impacting the health of communities. They are responsible for people. And again, it's always an impact to communities. It's always our communities. Why? Because they figure it's easier to make us drive to a richer area because rich people aren't going to drive to our communities, right? So communities that we've worked in, they're taking several buses to get to a grocery store to be able to eat. What's worse is that we have people in some areas, even in like St. Louis, where the buses limit how many bags a person can take on a bus. So you can only take 2 bags on a bus, then that's all the groceries you're going to be able to buy for the week. So after we do this assessment, we then go back into communities and we do focus groups in the communities. And we did one in San Jose, which is the most impacted area, and we did some in Vallejo. You can go to the next slide if you want. And for these focus groups, we pay everybody for their time. The last one we did, we gave $50. I'm sure it'd have to increase by now. But we don't believe it's good to take wisdom from communities without compensating people. We believe it's very important to honor and acknowledge people's lived experiences and give them money for their time because their time is worth something. We also fed them a vegan meal and found out that, like a lot of these communities, the kids were vegan, but parents were struggling to be able to figure out how to feed them because they didn't have access to healthy foods. All of the focus groups in San Jose were conducted in Spanish, but in Vallejo, we had a different demographic there, and we did like 5 or 6 in that community. So in terms of the problem with lack of access to healthy foods, in terms of solutions, one that everybody can participate in is fight for living wages for everybody. The other solution we see is urban gardens. And we have an updated page on our website about growing your own food, even if it's just on your windowsill. But basically, growing your own food gets you off a system, at least for Black and Brown and Indigenous people, a system that was never made for us to thrive. It was made off of our back, our blood, our sweat, and some of our lives. That system was never made for us. And so we don't believe it's a broken system. We believe it was a system that was just created for a certain type of people. And so we believe that if we get off a system that was never meant for us and for everybody to kind of, if you had the ability to grow your own food, to grow your own food. The systems that exist currently are not in place to benefit anybody except for corporations. So growing your own food is a way to resist that. For those people like me who have only ever lived in apartments, and I don't know that I believe you can own property, the other solution we see, the next slide, is worker-owned cooperatives, where the workers are the owners of the business. It's not going to Arkansas with a Walmart family. It's staying in the community, and the people who own that co-op are the ones who make the decisions. This is Adriana, one of the owners of Mandela Grocery in Oakland, and they got to make a decision for the first few years. All the profits went back into the company, into the cooperative. Now, over time, they were able to get more profits, and she was able to get a car. So they decide where their profits go, and more than not, their profits go to help the community, to help the seniors, to help EBT, to make sure that everybody gets fresh and healthy foods. So in terms of what we recommend you can do, and if you all want to get our leaflet on our table, the list is in the back of here too. But we say, go vegan. One of the things is that, like, if you don't want to cause harm to another living being, then going vegan for the animals is a great way to do that. All we do is say at the end, if you have access to healthy foods, right? Because again, not everybody has that access. Now, should we fight and help everybody get that access? Absolutely. But everybody doesn't. Try not to support corporations that violate human and animal rights. Lend your voice to the needs of farm workers. Choose organic. It doesn't mean that they're better for the farm workers in every way. It just means they're not going to be exposed to toxic chemicals. Use our chocolate list to not support slavery and child labor in the chocolate industry. Don't use single plastic water bottles if you can avoid it. Bring your own. Buy local. We do strongly support, if you're going to farmers markets, that you support Black and brown farmers because they are more disadvantaged in starting their businesses than others. Support living wages. We go to the next one. We have more information on our website about bananas, coffee, palm oil, wine, avocados, and tea now as well. Again, we encourage you to speak out against food justice issues and what's happening. Speak to managers. Driscoll's is a horrible company, so if you see your stores carrying Driscoll's berries, great job to try to find another supplier. Get involved. We have a monthly newsletter. You can sign up at our table, and then spreading the word. Go to the next one. We also have all of these booklets are on our table. And if you go to the next one, we have vegan soul food and vegan Indian food coming out soon. I will say that all of these guides are made by people from within the organization. We don't pick people's cultures and say we're going to make a guide about it. It's based on who we are. And all these recipes come from people of those cultures. You can go to the next one. And then all of these guides are on our website as well, and they're in the various languages. Vegan Mexican foods in English and Spanish, vegan Lao foods in English and in Lao, vegan Filipino food is in English and in Tagalog, vegan Chinese food is in English and simplified Chinese. And vegan soul food will be in English and in Spanish. We have a new zine. We have an amazing youth organizer, and we have a new zine coming out for young people. She's also the one who helped create Vegan Eating Eating Vegan in College. We go to the next one. If y'all can help spread the word, we do have a youth scholarship coming that's going on right now that we do award scholarships for young people with their artwork or poetry or essays. You can go to the next one. And then the deadline to apply is May 29th. The next one. So I know this is a lot. I always want to give people a second to breathe. To me, I want people to think of these as opportunities, not to think of it as overwhelming, but opportunities to help make a difference. What we like to say is eat your ethics. If you don't want to cause harm to another being, then don't consume animals. If you don't believe in slavery and child labor, then don't eat chocolate that comes from areas that support that. If you believe in worker rights, please support farm workers. Please support all workers. I feel strongly now is the time, in the sense that we're in a situation where those of us who believe in justice, those of us who believe in collective liberation, for those of us who believe in human decency, that is not on the table in our government right now. And we have the opportunity right now for everybody to help make the change that needs to happen. We can't rely on the courts. We can't rely on laws. We can't say, climate crisis is really bad, but I'm sure that these corporations will do their part. It's up to us. It's up to us collectively, not just as individual in our individual lives. It's us collectively to take a stand and to speak out. If you love an environmental organization that is still having animal products at their events, speak out to them, because you can't be, they can't rely on anybody else anymore. It's up to us that we have to speak out for each other. If there has been no other time, there is time now. And we've seen this. We've seen this in our history. We've seen this when it came to women speaking out in England against abolishing slavery. What did they do? They didn't have the right to vote at the time, so what did they do? They started a sugar boycott, and they got things changed. What happened with the farm workers, even though the farm workers are still in a dire situation? There was the Great Boycott, created a lot of awareness for farm workers. The Black Panther Party came at a time we still need them to really take care of community, to take care of the fact that children were going to school hungry. We need to take this opportunity now. We need to, in our own capacity, in own ways that we can do it, but to speak out on human decency every chance we get. And right now, for those of us who have the privilege of eating more than one time a day, we have the ability every single time to say something about what we believe in and what we don't believe in. And we need to not just do that in our homes, we need to speak to those corporations. And we need to support all the boycotts that are going on right now to stand up and defend human decency. Thank you. All right, questions?
I was wondering, when you're talking about the slave labor for the cow, and then I think about coconuts and the monkeys.
Mhm.
Research on that?
We have. Actually, we have a page on coconuts. I'm trying to remember now. I know that the majority of places where that is being done with the monkeys isn't as commercially viable. But we do have on our website the which ones not to buy. We don't have the companies. There's only 6 of us at the organization. So we don't have